Hello to our audience, and thank you for joining us for today's event. Today's event is brought to you by Tech Media and Nutanix, and we're going to talk to you about taking control of your data center destiny, enabling freedom, improved operations, and efficiency. And today is part one of a four-part webinar series entitled How to Choose the Right IT Architecture for Your Business. And we're going to be hearing from the Vice President of Product Marketing at Nutanix. His name is Greg Smith, who will be talking to us about how hyperconverged infrastructure, the enterprise cloud, and lots of other things can help us take control of our data center. This is a really timely topic, I think, as organizations seek to undergo really all kinds of transformation, and they have to think about ways to really reframe how IT supports the environment. And that includes everything from the architecture to operations to processes to procedures and everything in between. My name is Scott Lowe. I'm a partner in and a CEO of Tech Media. And as I mentioned, our presenter from Nutanix today is Greg Smith. Greg, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Scott.
Before we get started, I want to take care of a few housekeeping items. As a reminder, this is part one of four. So this is a four-part webinar series, and we have the next three parts are the next 3 weeks, same time, same place. And we'll be talking about other topics in taking control of your data center destiny. This is a special webcast series from Nutanix. And the critical piece to understand is that this is going to tell a broader story. We're going to talk about all of the things you need to be thinking about as you undergo transformation efforts in your organization. During the very last part of this series, the part four of the series, we'll be giving away a Microsoft Surface Studio as a prize. And to increase your chances to win, attend all the parts. For each part you attend, you'll have a chance to win that great prize. And today's prize is a Tango gift card. You may wonder what a Tango card is. So, one of the things we've done in the past is we've done things like Best Buy gift cards or gift cards from other companies. A Tango gift card allows you to choose what company you want to get a gift card from. So it gives you a little bit more choice in the prize. If you have questions, we urge you to ask them using the control panel that you see on your screen, the questions tab. That's really critical because we will be taking questions throughout the event. And if you have questions about anything we're discussing, about the land of hyperconverged infrastructure in general, anything, please ask the question because we want to be able to talk about it. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Smith from Nutanix. Greg, take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much, Scott, and thank you for everyone for attending. Look forward to the interaction and answering your questions. So let's start at the beginning, and let's talk about today's operations in the data center and the complexity that is plaguing a lot of teams and slowing down business. So what we see is today, IT leaders really struggle to manage the unrelenting complexity across all of their IT environments. So not only their core data center infrastructure, but the remote and branch offices, their DR sites, and more. And this complexity makes it difficult for the business to pursue new markets, develop new products and services, and to really tackle strategic initiatives such as digital transformation projects. Instead, too much time is spent just sustaining basic IT operations. So much of the challenge really stems from legacy infrastructure. Legacy infrastructure constructed with discrete resource silos, such as storage, servers, virtualization, networking, and security. And it's this fragmented design that makes it difficult and time-consuming to provision new IT environments to run critical business applications. So not only is it time-consuming to provision, these architectures also contain multiple points of failure. So creating a really fragile IT system that's susceptible to unplanned downtime. Now, managing this IT complexity also demands significant process overhead, even for executing basic tasks, such as adding additional capacity or upgrading software. And this adds unwanted friction to our basic IT operations and ultimately slows the business. Legacy architectures also impose financial burdens, with large upfront capital purchases required even for small-scale deployments. So this complexity, I think we're all aware of, it's undeniable, and it's had a profound impact on already stretched IT teams. And it requires the coordination between multiple IT specialists to handle even the most simplest operations. and most importantly, it leaves really little time for true innovation. So at the same time, we've seen the advent of very popular public cloud services, and these public clouds have really reset expectations of what enterprise IT must deliver in many ways. First, internal IT consumers, the customers of enterprise IT, they need infrastructure provision in minutes, not weeks or months. And if they don't get it, they'll circumvent IT teams in favor of public cloud services, creating, of course, shadow IT challenges. Public cloud has also changed how organizations pay for and consume IT services. So expensive, over-provisioned infrastructure is no longer tenable, right? It gets rejected by the business. Instead, our business partners expect pay-as-you-grow economics, where IT services are provided only when needed and paid for only when used. They also want solutions that are simple to deploy, manage, and scale, where I have one-click operations for common workflows. And then lastly, because we're in the cloud era, I expect continuous innovation. I want to be able to roll out new features and capabilities into my production environment continuously, non-disruptively, with no maintenance windows. I mean, that is a cloud. That is a SaaS world where I get my environment updated automatically. So what does this mean for IT teams? So the failure to recognize and adapt to these elevated expectations poses real risk to the business and threatens to make IT teams less relevant. So Scott, I don't know if you want to...
We do, absolutely. We do have a poll question for the audience, and the question is, in the next 12 to 18 months, what percentage of your organization's production workloads will run in a third-party public cloud? So that basically, where are you going to run, how many of your workloads run in Amazon or Azure or Google or something like it, in addition to your on-premises environment? And Greg, this is, a topic that's obviously been growing in popularity for the last decade, but what are your thoughts, around the role the hybrid cloud plays in organizations' data center and workload plans?
Yeah, I think what we've seen and what customers tell us is the ultimate IT operating model is one of a hybrid cloud, and in that they want both a public and a private cloud environment. They want the ability to engage the public cloud services that make sense for any particular application set or business unit, but they also want the ability to run applications and workloads on-prem for those that need more security and more control. And it's the ability to not only have those environments, but have some level of integration between the two of them. And I think what companies are working toward is making applications and data mobile between those environments. And that's where you get true control. When you can pick the right cloud environment for each application and for the business. So you get the level, you get the SLAs you want, you get the economic and consumption model that you want. And that's what Nutanix customers are really asking for, is they want hybrid cloud and they want the ability to unify their cloud operations between public and private.
Yeah, and they're looking for that sort of control because it gives them the opportunity to have different ways that they can scale different kinds of workloads. As you mentioned, the mobility, so they have all these distributed applications they want to have accessible from anywhere. But they want to have the ability to run things that need to stay on premises. And so hybrid cloud really gives them the best of both worlds. But that common operating model in the center is really what makes the whole thing work. And we're going to talk more about that. So I want to share the results of our poll now. We've had about 41% of the audience has responded, and some of you don't have anything in the cloud, but a lot of you are just kind of dipping your toes, and a few of you have gone further. So this is really interesting, and we'll talk more about this later on in this series. So Greg, I'm going to turn it back over to you to continue on.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Thanks, everybody, for sharing your perspective. So we're talking about a world that's multi-cloud. And these multi-cloud environments are really needed if you're going to meet a diverse and expanding set of IT requirements. Now, these multi-cloud designs may include as we talked about, public cloud services such as AWS and GCP or Google Cloud Platform, private clouds running in corporate data centers or colos, as well as, and this is often overlooked, distributed or edge deployments for remote branch offices and field-based IT sites. So increasingly, when companies are moving to a cloud operating model, they want to apply those workflows, those management paradigms, not just to their data center, not just to the public cloud services, but to all their locations. Like they want to be able to manage the IT in a remote location as simply with the same level of automation that they do in their own data center. So in a multi-cloud environment, we see individual clouds may deliver specific capabilities and have a unique set of operational requirements. But multi-cloud means that I want to be able to lower the long-term TCO, the total cost of ownership for my IT services. These are the benefits. This is what I'm striving for if I really am successful in managing across different clouds. I want to be able to accelerate the overall agility of my IT so I can keep pace with the business. I want to bring real-time visibility of cloud costs, both in my use of public cloud services as well as my own data center. And I need this visibility to make informed decisions about where I place applications and where I manage my data. So increasingly, we see economics being an important factor in how not only cloud architectures are designed, but how they're used. And so getting that visibility, not just on availability and performance, but economics on a real-time basis is increasingly important. Now, let's go back to the basics. Let's talk about what's happening within our four walls, within our enterprise data center. I think it's pretty accepted that with sort of the popularity of these web scale environments, the Googles, the Amazons, that these companies have proven there's a better, more efficient way of designing and operating data centers. They've done it at massive scale. A lot of what has been innovated, a lot of what has been learned can be leveraged directly in enterprise data centers. And so what we see is that there's a modernization taking place in a typical enterprise data center. When we think about the data center design in the cloud era, it has to incorporate two fundamental tenets. One, it should incorporate a 100% software-defined architecture. When architectures are built on software, they are inherently more flexible and agile than those based on specialized hardware devices, which can quickly become obsolete and they depreciate in value. Now, a well-designed, software-driven data center, a pretty accepted concept now, it has the following. It has to be full stack. What do I mean by that? A full stack means it delivers a complete infrastructure stack with all the IT resources to run any application. Resources mean the full stack compute, storage, virtualization, networking, and security. I should be able to have the freedom to deploy that software on a broad range of hardware platforms, the hardware servers of my choice. This will prevent lock-in, and it enables the long-term flexibility to redeploy software on a different platform in the future in order to meet changing use cases and business requirements. So I'm trying to avoid tightly coupled hardware and software so that I'm not locked into a particular technology, architecture, or even vendor. I want a data center environment that can be ready in minutes, ready to provision applications immediately. This is what it means to be in the cloud era. No longer are our business partners willing to tolerate, days, weeks, or months simply to stand up their applications. And I need a full ecosystem of technology solutions that augment and extend my innate data center capabilities, and ideally do this to be API integration and proven operability. So that's what it means to have a software architecture, but we also want to make sure the data center responds to the needs of the applications, not vice versa. So we have to remember that the first-class citizens here are the services and workloads that power the business. An application-centric data center, it provides IT services that adapt and respond, again, to the needs of the applications. This means the ability to run any application, virtualized, container-based, bare metal, at any scale. So I should never be limited to both not only how large scale, but how small scale I can run. I want the ability to have a single platform that runs all my applications. It's not just running them. I need better control. I want application orchestration and lifecycle management. I don't have to turn to a different tool to manage the applications from my runtime environment. And increasingly, as we look more toward a cloud-oriented world, I want platform services to support application development, testing, and production. So for example, things like one-click database provisioning and a very efficient copy data management. Services that I need fundamentally as I manage a portfolio of applications. And lastly, I want the ability to abstract or decouple applications from the underlying infrastructure. I want to make workloads mobile across different IT environments. And that's what we talked about, being multi-cloud and having the flexibility to run the applications wherever the business thinks best. Now, modern IT environments extend beyond the core data center, and they include the complete end-to-end IT fabric. So this enterprise-wide strategy means having common IT building blocks. Common IT building blocks that allow for standardization of operations across all my environments. All the ones we talked about, data center, robo, and distributed edge locations. Why do I do this? If I can standardize operations and technologies across all of my sites, that means a single team can now manage operations at those locations with common technology stacks, management constructs, and IT workflows. That's what Nutanix users and customers are doing today. Nutanix operators can manage from a single console both data center, edge, and remote and branch office locations. I also want the freedom to choose the right hardware with the right configuration for every location and use case. So I may want a different server technology, CPU architecture, different configuration in my smaller offices than I have in my core data center. I also want to manage IT operations centrally with full visibility and control. I want to get that much talked about, much desired single pane of glass. And then I want the flexibility in the future to look at the same infrastructure to handle really edge cases like the emerging Internet of Things applications.
And we have our next poll question. And if you look at the single most important criteria, so we're asking for one answer here. When you look at new IT infrastructure, what is that in your organization? Are you looking to be more agile, more cost-effective, make things easier to use, more resilient so that it can't fail, faster, or more secure? Like, what's the most important factor to you when you're basically assessing new technology? Now, Greg, one of the things you talked about was this idea of an overarching fabric, and that's one of the ways I like to really think about what we're moving towards. When we think about hybrid cloud, especially when we start to throw edge into the equation, is the need for that common data center operating fabric. When you look at, and especially as you look at multi-cloud as well, when you look at the Nutanix customer base, what are some of the trends you're seeing around multi-cloud adoption and also edge adoption that really help, that really are being accelerated by this idea of the fabric that Nutanix is providing them with?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to economics. I think that while there's a number of considerations about where I run my workloads, if I'm a cloud operator, if I'm an IT executive, and I'm looking long term at what my costs are running different workloads in different environments, I need that data. And too often we've seen customers get unpleasantly surprised by their public cloud bills when they come due, because they lack the visibility of what services are being consumed, by whom, how much it's costing them, and how much it will cost them. And as they venture into multiple public clouds, then they lose that unified viewpoint. So what we've seen is one important dimension of this multi-cloud shift is, how do I get a single dashboard where I can see exactly what I'm consuming where and what's costing me, and then use that to make better decisions going forward, and maybe use that information to inform my business units too. So everyone has complete knowledge and visibility of what the costs are, and there's no unpleasant surprises. So I think that unified, consolidated dashboard, if you will, for cost and across different environments is becoming more and more important.
And in addition to cost, the unified dashboard can also help from a security standpoint too, can it? Because it helps you maybe uncover some things you didn't know were still operating out there. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for mentioning that. So I think that as I'm monitoring the state of different applications, I can do compliance checks on those. I can find out which ones have been locked down, have the right authentication and security controls in place. It will never be suffice for a full security audit, but with such a large number of diverse applications in a typical enterprise, it gives me a very easy way to check the compliance and monitor the compliance and controls on applications across different environments. So I get cost and I get compliance.
And our audience is really looking at the same sorts of things. I'm not surprised to see cost being the number one driver for data center decisions, because we see that all the time. But I'm actually surprised it's not higher than it is. So people are really looking at things really from different perspectives these days than they may have in the past, especially around security. That's quickly becoming, as we all know, a number one concern in a lot of enterprises. And great, take it away.
Yeah. Let's kind of wrap that up in multi-cloud from an operational standpoint. So I think it's clear from what we see in Nutank's customer base that public cloud services are becoming an integral part of a larger IT strategy. And teams are asking, how do I unify or even harmonize critical operations across different environments, public and private? So what we're asking for, some we mentioned, I want management frameworks that can standardize operations and workflows across clouds, accommodating differences in technologies because we have different stacks when we're talking different clouds. Teams need the ability to seamlessly extend the functionality of private cloud infrastructure with cloud services that are melded into a single management framework. So the idea is, how do I bring the cloud to the data center, right? How do I augment what I'm doing in my data center by attaching cloud services rather than having to refactor applications or migrate data every time I want to benefit from a cloud environment? We mentioned efficient use of cloud infrastructure that demands real-time visibility of cost and the state of compliance. And then as IT managers become more like cloud operators, they need the ability to quickly select applications from a marketplace and then deploy them in the cloud environment of their choice. So this is one thing that Nutanix is working on as part of our stack, is to build in that marketplace so that when one part of the organization develops an application or a service, they can share it with the rest of the organization, and the corporate IT team can stay in control and control where the application gets deployed for cost, resilience, and performance, but still give some self-service back to the various groups. And the full realization of a multi-cloud strategy really brings the freedom to choose the right cloud for every application, and that's what our customers are striving to do in the end. So now let's talk about how to achieve some of this, particularly in your data center. When we talk about an application-centric infrastructure, it requires designing and deploying and managing that infrastructure with the flexibility of a software OS, meaning a single layer of software that can be consumed in various form factors. And this is needed to really meet the needs of diverse IT environments. There's never a one-size-fits-all. So IT teams really need the freedom to standardize on a common software architecture with the ability to choose between pre-built appliances where the software is pre-installed and ready for deployment, where they can install the same software, but on the hardware platform of their choosing, and having the option to consume the software as a cloud service and then manage applications across their environment. So it's about getting the same experience. It's about the same technology that puts the customer in control, that they can consume as an appliance, they can consume the software on the hardware that they choose, or just use it as a cloud service. And so we're talking about one software OS, one common set of capabilities, one integrated management framework, but multiple deployment options. So we think that's a big part of the future of making IT responsive to the business and more agile.
You know, and that brings us to our next poll question, which is now up on the screen, and we invite our audience to answer it. And it's, what's your preferred form factor when you deploy new IT infrastructure? And I think this is a really interesting question. And, you know, when we look at making a cloud, bare cloud, just, you know, what you provision from, you know, Azure or AWS or, you know, what have you, there's a lot of work that goes into making applications that can operate there. But when we start looking at something like Nutanix, because of the software centricity of the platform, we go back to that fabric thing, right? Where basically a workload that we have on premises, we can easily move into the cloud and vice versa. Do you see customers well, that's one of the reasons that they're buying the platforms, because of the ease by which they can move workloads where they need them to operate?
Yeah, I think that increasingly, not only they want that portability, but to get there, when they look at technology and the architecture, they have to make sure that the applications and the services are decoupled from the hardware. So I want to be able to get the same experience whether I'm running the same software on HPE servers or Cisco servers or Nutanix appliance or Dell EMC, right, or consume as a cloud service. I want to be able to have my applications have access to an object store. And I don't care if that object store is running in S3 or a third-party cloud or on-prem. It's all about providing that ubiquity of services for applications so the applications can run in the right environments and have the ability to move if conditions or requirements change.
So we have a relatively tactical question from the audience, but I want to ask it anyway. One of the things you mentioned was that, you know, people can install the software on whatever server they like. The question here is if they're moving away from EqualLogic, and I assume it's EqualLogic plus some set of servers. What are they can't just reuse the storage, or can they? But the servers may be candidates for reuse if they wanted to install the Nutanix software. What are some of the things that people have to keep in mind as they consider the hardware parameters they have to live within for installing a software-only version of the Nutanix platform?
Okay, it's a good question. The Nutanix software runs on just off-the-shelf x86 servers. I think there are workload considerations certainly. So you're looking at the basic server configurations, how much SSD, how much overall capacity, how many CPU cores do I need for a particular workload. But the beautiful thing about doing it with hyper-converged infrastructure is that I'm not doing it on a per node basis. I'm doing it on a cluster. So if I'm sizing an environment, a cluster consisting of multiple servers working together, that if I don't size initially correctly for a particular workload or set of workloads, I have the flexibility to change. I can certainly add more capacity, and we can do that very simply, non-disruptively. But you can also scale down. I can actually remove nodes from a cluster if I have underutilization and move them to a different environment, different cluster. So that's one of the flexibility. You don't have to nail it perfect at the right time. And you also know, we'll talk about this just in a bit, that when I scale my environment, I can scale linearly. So it makes it easy to predict the capacity, the performance a particular environment will deliver to an application.
Perfect. I think we'll look at our results. We've about half the audience has responded. We have some that prefer appliances with pre-installed software. Some want the flexibility of software. Some prefer cloud, and some want some combination of the above. Most do. So that's I don't think there's too much in the way of surprises surprises here. And I'll give it back to you, Greg.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Thanks, everybody, for sharing. So what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit more about what's available from a product and technology perspective. Some of this will be Nutanix specific. Some will just be this new modern hyperconverged infrastructure that I think it's important that we all understand. So hyperconverged infrastructure, or HCI, is intended to simplify the design, the construction, and the deployment of new infrastructure. It converges all of the resources into a single scale-out solution that can run any application. So some of the things you should expect from a Nutanix solution. Nutanix infrastructure can be deployed in just 60 minutes or less. From the time that an appliance arrives and is unpacked, or you deploy or install the software on a server, assuming you have network IPs and ports available, not always the case, but if the network's ready, you're up and running in 60 minutes or less. So that means your application teams can start provisioning workloads in those environments. And we make it easy to get started, so you can start small. Often our customers start with just 3 or 4 servers we call nodes, and then they can scale the capacity. They can scale storage, and they can scale compute, and they can do it without limit. There's no upper bounds. And as I mentioned a moment ago, that when you scale an environment, when you add nodes, that scaling is linear, 100%. So because each node adds a proportion amount of storage and server capacity. So for example, if you need to double the overall capacity of a Nutanix deployment, you simply add 2x the number of nodes. There's really no guesswork. And because it's 100% software, it runs on off-the-shelf servers from any leading server manufacturer. And perhaps most importantly, you can take that entire software stack and we can upgrade it in a single click or maybe a couple clicks without disruption to the live environment. So we have non-disruptive, one-click software upgrades. That means that if for any reason you need to upgrade the software in a Nutanix environment, you can do it non-disruptively during production hours and upgrade not only the Nutanix software, but the underlying hypervisor, the firmware of the hardware, and the BIOS. So this is how things operate in the cloud era. I don't bring environments down every time I want to get new capabilities. Now, two of the fundamental requirements, if I'm going to look toward a new modern environment, if I'm going to move away from my older SAN or NAS environments, then I need to make sure that I'm providing both enterprise-class storage features and reliable security. So hyperconverged, including Nutanix, we routinely replace all SAN and NAS storage from all leading vendors. And you can see on the screen, we have a rich set of storage capabilities. The data reduction and the resiliency, replication and DR capabilities. And for maximum flexibility, Nutanix provides these software-defined storage capabilities with the granularity of a single VM, so you can get really precise. And then, of course, they're secure. Nutanix builds very distinctly with a secure by design methodology. And then so not only is it built to be secure, it actually incorporates a lot of features here. Among Nutanix is particularly popular in the U.S. federal government across both military, intelligence, and civilian agencies. So our solutions are deployed in well more than 100 different parts of the U.S. government. So they've gained the confidence that they can rely on Nutanix security for their critical applications and missions. Now, one reason that we've become a really popular choice in the hyperconverged market is because of our distributed systems architecture. And so here's some of the basics as you look at the diagram here. So Nutanix software is simply deployed on a cluster of servers or nodes. We start with at least 3 or 4. We do have 1 and 2 node deployment options for smaller locations. Each node has CPU, memory, storage. The storage could be SSD plus hard disk drives in a hybrid or all flash. And then, of course, a hypervisor. The nodes themselves are connected via just a standard Ethernet switch, typically 10 gig. There's no dependency about which model or manufacturer. Nor is there any need for a fiber channel switch. We're talking about commodity Ethernet fabric. Now, the core software runs in user mode VM that we call the controller VM, and it runs on each node in the cluster. What the controller VMs creates a single storage pool that uses the direct attached storage in each node in the cluster. So it basically aggregates all of the disk capacity in each server, and we call this our distributed storage fabric. And by pooling the storage across the cluster, I eliminate the need for standalone storage arrays like SANs. Now, our distributed storage fabric distributes data and metadata across all nodes in the cluster and provides, as we saw, all the necessary storage features like deduplication, compression, erasure coding, cloning, snapshotting, in a distributed fashion, with no single point of failure. Because I distribute everything, I can expand capacities when I need it. I can just add a node. The additional storage that comes in that node automatically gets added to the cluster. And what I get as an IT professional is linear, predictable performance, and capacity increases as the cluster grows. And one thing that we are proud of, and a lot of our customers really appreciate about Nutanix, is that we provide data locality. We provide data locality for the best VM and cluster performance. So what it means is, in our design, all I/O requests from a VM are handled by the local controller or controller VM on that node. So for example, when a VM writes data, one copy of the data is always written to the local node. That way, read requests are handled immediately using data on the same node without going over the network. And if a VM moves to a different node, then in the background, the data is also migrated to that new node to restore locality. So we keep data local to compute for best performance, and we distribute the backups, the replicas of that data for resiliency. Now, fundamental to modernizing the data center is I want what we've been talking about, an extensible software-based platform that runs all my applications, and I can consolidate all my enterprise storage services. So what we provide, and other HCIs products are starting to catch up, is we provide Nutanix Files, an integrated, massively scalable file service that allows you to replace individual file servers, such as those from NetApp. So Files is ideal for departmental shares via NFS support, as well as integrated storage services for VDI, including user profiles and home directories. So by integrating file-based storage, you can eliminate another infrastructure silo, the NAS silo. We also expose an iSCSI interface with Nutanix Volumes, so we can provide scalable block-based storage to applications running external to the Nutanix environment. And lastly, Nutanix Buckets. We have an integrated S3 compliant object store that I referred to earlier that's perfect for data archival and supporting modern, more cloud-native applications. So basically, Nutanix customers adopt our software because they can run nearly any virtual workload, from small-scale servers to large, very demanding, hungry databases. And besides virtual applications, we provide equal support for cloud-native services using containers. We now have a full-blown Kubernetes as a service, so you can deploy a Kubernetes environment on Nutanix without a lot of planning or expertise in just a matter of minutes. So application teams will now have the ability to run all their applications, VM or container-based, on a single Nutanix cluster. And of course, we manage it through a very elegantly simple user interface. We have a particular commitment to consumer-grade design, and this is exemplified via Prism. So unlike other IT vendors, we've been successful in consolidating both infrastructure and application management into a single UI, eliminating the need for multiple management consoles. Again, bringing simplicity back to the data center. So just some highlights. What you expect from Nutanix is a generous use of machine intelligence. So we're able to automate common operations and tasks and workflows. So for example, we have our XFit machine learning that automatically analyzes historical consumption of resources to accurately predict future cluster requirements. So we take the guesswork out of capacity planning. And we also we reduce a number of other tasks to a single click. So we can add nodes to a cluster in a click. We can, as I mentioned, update the software in a single click. And because it's a single pane and we see the full stack, you get complete visibility of the application health and performance per VM with very detailed storage, memory, CPU, and network metrics. So in short, we make it easy to see the performance of individual VM and, if necessary, remediate any issues, and doing so in a single click.
All right, we have our next and I believe final poll question. Is your organization using hyperconverged infrastructure today? And there's a series of answers that I'll let you read on the screen. Greg, one of the things, I've been working with you and Nutanix in various forms for a long time. And one of the things that's been really interesting is to see the company grow from a hyperconverged provider to really a full platform play. And I think that's important for people to understand is you're still doing what you've always done, but now you've added a whole bunch of other stuff. And that brings this to, that has made it really an enterprise platform. And that includes all the file options, the cloud pieces, the database management, all that stuff. I mean, what's that kind of been, this is a personal question, but what's that been like for you to experience over the last few years?
Well, two words, right? Exciting and stressful too, because it's an ambitious vision, but it's one we think is necessary. We think the whole idea of hyperconvergence isn't simply putting storage and compute and virtualization in a single solution or a single appliance, but it's really about continuing to collapse all the silos in IT, right? All the storage silos, and breaking down barriers between different clouds. Ultimately, when you modernize your data center, hopefully with HCI, hyperconverged infrastructure, it becomes one of many clouds. So it's the idea that a lot of that modernization starts in the data center, but it's really about taking a cloud-first approach to how I manage my infrastructure and doing it in support of the business and the application. So we've seen a real shift in terms of it's the applications and business that are driving the IT decisions, not the other way around. And I think we can all agree there's still a long ways to go for all of us as IT professionals and all vendors.
I would agree with that. I do a lot of consulting still for end user organizations, and there's a path forward that needs to be taken by a lot of organizations. Absolutely. I'm going to share the results. We have about 40% or so of our audience has responded. And as you can see, there's a lot that have not deployed hyperconvergence yet. We have a few that said everything's on HCI, but a lot are still either looking at options or they don't really have a lot in the way of plans right now, although that may change over time. And Greg, I'll let you finish up here.
Yeah, and the last slide, and something that we feel very strongly about, we think this is more advice, it's kind of hard to argue, that when you're looking at your next generation IT and you're making really critical decisions and spending a lot of your company budget, it's really important to protect the freedom to choose, right? To really make sure you have the ability to pick the right technologies, the right clouds, the right technologies for every use case. So we've tried to lead in providing customers with the freedom to choose per use case. And so for us, this means that we support all popular hypervisors. and you can see them here, but increasingly people want the hypervisor built in. So we have our own native AHV virtualization layer, license-free, does not cost. And today, we have just about 40% of all Nutanix customers are using AHV and choosing that for their virtualization layer. We also, you should demand the freedom to select the best server hardware, but making sure you get a consistent experience regardless of what hardware you choose. And then we've tried to seamlessly integrate public clouds into the IT environment so that you can manage applications across clouds, including AWS, Google, Azure, and of course, what I haven't talked about is the Nutanix Xi Cloud. So I mentioned earlier that we're building native cloud services that can be attached or melded into a Nutanix environment. And there's a family of those Nutanix Xi Cloud services that we'll probably talk about in subsequent webinars as part of this series. But I hope this gives you a perspective on what Nutanix customers are doing to modernize their data center and bring better overall agility and performance to across their IT fabric. And so with that, Scott, I guess we can entertain any questions that people have.
Yeah, before we get to that, I want to mention that I want to go over what the next 3 parts of this webinar series are, and we do have some questions after that. The next week, February 5th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll be presenting on simplifying data center operations, reducing complexity to restore peace to the family vacation. On February 12th at the same time, Data Center Avengers Assemble, creating the right data center support team. And our final part of this series will be on February 19th, outsmarting the data center mafia, eliminating true-ups and simplifying enterprise licensing agreements. I hate true-ups, so I'm looking forward to hearing more in that part of the series. So we do have some questions from the audience. The first question is, what is a CVM?
Okay, good question. So a CVM in that one diagram is the acronym for a controller VM. What it effectively does is Nutanix software, the software that powers hyperconvergence, runs in a virtual machine. It runs alongside those other guest VMs, so what we call it the controller VM. And a controller VM runs on that host hypervisor, and it runs on every host. And it has the fundamental responsibility of aggregating all that direct-to-drive storage across the nodes into a single storage pool. And those controller VMs work with each other on every node in a cluster to manage cluster operations, and that what makes it a distributed system. The one thing I'll mention is there's really 2 fundamental ways to build hyperconvergence. You can do it like Nutanix has and decouple it from the hypervisor, run it in user space, and that allows you to run our software on the hypervisor that you choose, or you can build it into the hypervisor. The downside to building into the hypervisor is that you're basically, really doubling down and locking in not only your compute, but now your data into a single hypervisor. It also means that you lose the ability to upgrade your HCI software without also bringing down your hypervisor. So we feel like to preserve both freedom of choice and flexibility, it's better to run in user space right alongside your applications.
The next question we have is, I think that the question is, do you support KVM by itself, or is that all done through with your enhanced version of KVM known as AHV with some additional things?
Yeah, thank you. I just spent a lot of time on this. I mentioned that we support multiple hypervisors. Our own native hypervisor is AHV, and that is based upon KVM. What we did is we took open source KVM and did a few things. We provided very modern management for it, which was lacking as an open source product. We also did a number of things to improve its performance, and many of those are documented in the Nutanix Bible and other publications, and we hardened it. I mentioned that Nutanix is widely deployed in the U.S. federal government. HV is also popular across the U.S. government installations. And so and they've adopted that for performance and security. So if you're looking for KVM in Nutanix, you're looking at AHV. That's your best option.
Okay, next question is, what about Linux? I mean, I assume that basically your Linux support is going to be based on whatever the hypervisor support for Linux via virtual machines. Is that correct?
That's right. I mean, the whole system is built, the control VM is built on Linux, and most of our customers run all flavor of Linux in the applications running on Nutanix. I mean, today we have over 11,000 enterprise customers around the world, including over 700 of the Global 2000 rely upon Nutanix, and we run every variety of workload that you can imagine, using almost every operating system that you can imagine. So if you have specific questions about, what Nutanix can do for you, I would just encourage you to talk to Nutanix channel partner or anyone, from Nutanix.
Sounds good. I think that's all the questions we'll take for today. We have time for. Greg, thank you very much for your presentation and providing that great information for part one of our 4-part series.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you, Scott, for hosting. And I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day to join us. And I hope you learned something and it inspired some additional thinking about your plans going forward.
And just as a reminder, in part 4 of this series, we'll be giving away a Microsoft Surface Studio. Join us for all parts of the series, and for each part you attend, you'll get an additional chance to win. And we'll be emailing you about information around your Tango gift card after this event. Thank you to everyone for participating today and for joining us. And thank you to Nutanix, and everybody have a great day.